Futhao Media VN. Welcome to the story of the Undying Galaxy, where a man once deemed ordinary steps into the vast cosmos to rewrite his own destiny. That night, atop Tianyue Mountain, the sky seemed torn apart by surging currents of astral energy. At the center of the formation, Lingzhe was condensing the galactic intent, the final step to advance into the heavenly king realm. 30 years of relentless cultivation, countless sneers at his mediocre talent, he believed in only one thing: if he had not fallen, he had not lost. But at the very moment the starlight converged, killing intent burst forth from the shadows. Mo Ye and Qin Feng appeared, joining forces in a sudden ambush. The intent shattered. Blood energy reversed its flow. Astral power scattered into the void. Lingzhe's body fell like a dying star. Drifting between life and death, he recalled a distant memory beneath an ancient pine tree, when the old mystic god had once asked him, "Why do you truly wish to become strong?" Back then he had no answer. Now, in absolute darkness, the answer slowly ignited like a lone star. The cosmos may devour the flesh, but willpower has never been extinguished. Continuing that moment as he fell into the vast expanse of the cosmos, Lingzhe could clearly feel every vein in his body cracking apart. The galactic intent he had painstakingly condensed over 30 years was now crumbling into dust. The bands of starlight that had once shone brilliantly around him shattered into countless fading fragments, swept away by the mountain winds without a trace. High above, Mo Ye crossed his arms with a cold sneer. Beside him stood Qin Feng, his eyes filled with contempt. In their view, Lingzhe had never been a true threat, only a stubborn fool trying to force his way into a realm that was never meant for him. The ambush had not only destroyed his breakthrough, but severed the martial path he had nearly pushed to its peak. "Talent decides everything," Mo Ye said indifferently. "You were never meant to step this far." Lingzhe lay in a pool of blood, his breathing thin as silk. His ears rang the world spinning around him. He knew all too well, if the galactic intent completely dissipated, his meridians would shatter and his soul would be consumed by the backlash. 30 years of endurance, 30 years of relentless persistence, everything seemed destined to end in this single, merciless instant. And yet, standing at the boundary between life and death, his eyes had not closed. Just as his consciousness began to sink into darkness, Lingzhe suddenly heard a distant sound, not Mo Ye's cold laughter, nor the howling wind atop the mountain, but the steady tapping of a bamboo staff from years ago. A hazy image slowly took shape. Beneath the ancient pine on Tianyue Mountain, the frail he once was repeated a basic punch over and over again, so simple it bordered on tedious. Sweat soaked his coarse robe, his palms split and bleeding, yet his gaze never wavered. Behind him stood the old mystic god, who merely asked one quiet question: "Why do you truly wish to become strong?" Back then, Lingzhe could only lower his head and answer that he didn't want to be looked down upon. The old man had gently shaken his head. A true powerhouse is not one who stands victorious at the summit, but one who keeps walking when everything has collapsed. Now at the brink between life and death, those words rang clearer than ever. The galactic intent shattered, true. His meridians severed, true. But his will, had it truly broken? A tiny spark suddenly flickered within his sea of consciousness. Not astral power, not spiritual energy, but something purer. A simple, unwavering belief: as long as a single breath remained, the path was not yet at its end. And in that instant, the darkness was no longer entirely dark. The tiny spark within Lingzhe's sea of consciousness suddenly spread, streaking across the darkness like a meteor tearing through the night. When he stopped trying to cling to the shattered galactic intent, when he accepted it as part of his own failure, the scattered fragments of starlight around him began to tremble softly. They did not gather in the old way. Instead, they began to revolve along an entirely different orbit. High above, Mo Ye frowned. Qin Feng had not even taken another step before an invisible pressure started radiating from the body that had seemed moments away from death. Lingzhe opened his eyes. In their depths, there was no longer the stubborn need to prove himself, only a terrifying calm. He no longer forced the heavens and earth to accept him. Instead, he let his own will become the center. Astral power did not converge from the outside, it surged outward from the depths of his soul. A phantom galaxy emerged behind him, turning slowly. "You said talent decides everything." He gave a faint smile, his voice hoarse yet steady. "Then today I will use willpower to shatter talent." He stepped into the air. Starlight erupted. Galactic annihilation fist. With a single punch, space twisted and the heavens trembled. Within that blinding radiance, the fate of one who had been scorned was irrevocably overturned. As the galactic annihilation fist tore through the sky, its aftershock rippled for hundreds of miles, shaking even the higher layers of space realms no mortal had ever set foot upon. At the edge of the sea of nihility, the white-robed swordmaster Shendu slowly opened his eyes. He felt it clearly: a new star had just been ignited. Before him stood a colossal ancient divine tree, its roots stretching through the void, prying open a faint passage that led toward the primordial ancient realm. Yet with every pulse of its growth, a massive shadow in the astral sea gnawed at it. That was Huangwu, the archaic divine beast that devoured the very structure of space itself. The divine tree trembled. The passage began collapsing segment by segment. One beat still missing. Shendu murmured softly. At that very moment, a streak of golden light shot in from afar. The young mechanist Ye Jing piloted the star vessel, its hull engraved with ancient runes, barely tearing open a path through the chaotic astral currents. Senior aboard. Without hesitation, Shendu stepped onto the star vessel. Behind them, Huangwu opened its maw and swallowed the final section of the divine tree. The path that had just been formed was severed in an instant. The star vessel accelerated, plunging into the deeper reaches of the galaxy. Behind them, the continent still trembled from Lingzhe's single punch. Ahead, an older world waited to be awakened. The aftershock of the galactic annihilation fist had yet to fully fade when the sky slowly sealed itself as though it had never been torn apart. Atop Tianyue Mountain, Lingzhe stood in the windless stillness, the starlight around him gradually settling. Mo Ye and Qin Feng had vanished into the void, leaving behind a silence so absolute it was almost unsettling. But his gaze did not linger on the battlefield. Far beyond, in the distant layer of space where the sea of nihility had just closed, he sensed a familiar aura departing from this world. Though he had never formally bowed as a disciple, he knew the man beneath the ancient pine, who once asked him for what reason was the very same white-robed swordmaster, now leaving aboard a vessel that crossed the galaxy. Amid the clouds still glowing with fading radiance, Lingzhe slowly lowered himself onto one knee, not kneeling to the heavens, nor kneeling in triumph, but kneeling to bid farewell to the one who had shown him the path. From this day on, he said softly, I will walk it on my own. News of a young Star King emerging spread swiftly across the continent. The great powers began to stir. A balance of authority once thought stable, now faced a new variable. And deep within the galaxy, the primordial ancient realm had opened its gates. An old era had just come to an end. A new era had officially begun. The starry sky gradually returned to its natural stillness, but the fate of the continent would never be the same. Lingzhe's emergence was like a stone cast into a mirror, calm lake ripples spreading far beneath the surface. The great sects began conducting secret investigations. Reclusive old monsters quietly opened their eyes. And those who once looked down on him now turned their gaze toward Tianyue Mountain with caution. Yet to Lingzhe, that victory was only the beginning. He understood clearly the one who had truly stepped onto the grand chessboard was the white-robed swordmaster in the primordial ancient realm. As for himself, if he wished to follow in those footsteps, he would have to grow even stronger. Not to prove anything to the world, but so that one day he could stand amid the galaxy, without feeling the weight of distance. A new era had begun, a young Star King had risen, a gateway to an ancient realm had opened, and the secrets of the universe awaited their unveiling. Futhao Media VN thanks you for accompanying us to the end of today's story. In the next video we will step into the primordial ancient realm, where the laws are entirely different and the dangers far beyond imagination. If you're looking forward to Lingzhe's next journey, drop the number 8 inches the comments below so I know.